My mom threw me out at 18 for wanting to be a pastry chef. 9 years later, she begged me for help. I was standing backstage at the Forbes 30 Under 30 ceremony in New York, peeking through the curtain, when my heart stopped. Front row, my mother and my father, sitting there like they had every right to be, like they hadn't thrown me out of their lives 9 years ago. My mother looked different, thinner. Something about the way she held herself told me she wasn't well. My father sat rigid, staring straight ahead like a man who didn't want to be there. And then I spotted Whitney, my older sister, sitting beside them. She was the one who had brought them here. She caught my eye through the gap in the curtain and gave me the smallest nod, like she was saying, "I know. I'm here." I had 30 seconds before they called my name. My hands were shaking. I could hear the host talking about young entrepreneurs who changed industries, and I knew I was next. So let me tell you how I got here. How an 18-year-old with $280 and a garbage bag full of clothes ended up owning 7 bakeries, a television show, a cookbook, and a net worth that would make the woman who threw her out choke on her morning coffee. My name is Violet, and this is the story of how my family learned that the daughter they discarded was the most valuable thing they ever had. Before I continue, I want to know who is here with me right now. Have you ever knocked on a door that never opened? Drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see where this story reaches. Now let me take you back. I grew up in a suburb outside Philadelphia. Nice street, nice lawn, nice car in the driveway. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family that had it figured out. But inside that house, there was only one currency that mattered: achievement. And my mother was the banker. My mother, Linda, ran everything like a corporation. Every grade, every award, every extracurricular, tracked and measured. Not because she was proud, because she was keeping score. She needed her children to reflect a certain image, the image of a family that was going somewhere. And for a long time, that system worked because of Whitney. My older sister was everything my mother wanted on paper. Top of her class, pre-med track, debate team captain. Whitney collected achievements the way other kids collected trading cards, and my mother displayed every single one of them like trophies in a glass case. And me? I was invisible. But not for long. I was not Whitney. I was never gonna be Whitney. While she memorized anatomy textbooks, I was in the kitchen, covered in flour, trying to figure out why my croissant dough kept tearing. While she brought home certificates, I brought home cakes. And my mother treated those two things very differently. She never screamed at me in public. What she did was worse. She simply acted like my passion didn't exist. When I won a local pastry competition at 16, she didn't come. When I told her I wanted culinary school instead of a 4-year university, she looked at me like I had told her I wanted to set the house on fire. My father, Gordon, sat through all of it in silence. He wasn't cruel. He was just absent in every way that mattered. He would glance at me sometimes with something that looked like sympathy, but he never once opened his mouth to defend me. Not once. And that silence was about to cost him more than he could ever imagine. Now here is the part that changed everything. The week after I graduated high school, I told my mother I had been accepted into a culinary arts program. Applied on my own, essays on my own, portfolio on my own. I was so proud I could barely breathe. She was at the kitchen table going through Whitney's medical school brochures. She didn't even look up at first. When she finally did, her face was completely flat. No anger, just this cold, measured blankness I can still feel in my chest. She told me this family did not raise someone to frost cakes for a living. She said if I wanted to waste my life playing with sugar and butter, I could do it somewhere else. She gave me until morning. The university they had chosen for me, or the door. I looked at my father. He was standing in the hallway. He heard every word. His jaw tightened and his eyes dropped to the floor. But he didn't say a word. That night, I went upstairs and knocked on Whitney's door. I needed my sister. I needed someone in that house to look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't crazy for wanting to follow what I loved. I stood there whispering her name, knocking softly for what felt like forever. She never opened the door. That hurt more than anything my mother said. Whitney was the one person I thought was on my side. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out for years, was that what was happening on the other side of that door was nothing like what I imagined. But I will get to that. And trust me, you are not ready for it. The next morning, I came downstairs with everything I owned in a garbage bag, not a suitcase. My mother had placed a black garbage bag on my bed during the night. That was her message. That was how much my dreams were worth to her. My father was standing by the front door. He didn't try to stop me. He reached out and shook my hand. Not a hug, a handshake. like I was a colleague leaving the office. Then he pressed something into my palm. $280. Every bill in his wallet. I walked out, down the driveway, past the nice lawn and the nice car, and I did not look back. Not because I was brave. Because I knew if I turned around and saw that door closed behind me, I would break. Hold on to that garbage bag moment. It is going to matter later in a way none of us expected. I took a bus south with no plan. I just needed to get far enough that Philadelphia couldn't pull me back. I ended up in Charleston, South Carolina, because that is where my money ran out. I stepped off that bus with less than $40 and nowhere to sleep. The first few days were brutal. I slept in a shelter. I walked the streets looking for any kitchen that would hire a girl with no experience, no references, and flour under her fingernails. Most places didn't let me finish my sentence. I was starting to wonder if my mother had been right about me, and then everything changed on a random morning. I walked past a tiny bakery on a side street I had somehow missed before. The sign above the door read, La Petite Maison. The window display had the most beautiful tart I had ever seen. Golden, symmetrical, more art than food. And the smell coming through that door was enough to stop me mid-step. I pushed it open. A bell chimed. Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 70s with silver hair pulled back, flour on her apron, and the sharpest eyes I had ever seen. Her name was Iris. She was French. She had owned that bakery for decades, alone, ever since her husband passed. And she was about to change everything. She looked at me. Garbage bag, messy hair, eyes that hadn't slept in days. And she didn't ask what happened. She pointed at the display case and asked what I thought of the tart. I told her it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, but that the crust looked slightly over-laminated. She raised one eyebrow. Then she smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had given me in weeks. She told me to come behind the counter. She handed me an apron. She said anyone who could spot over-lamination from the other side of the glass probably knew their way around a kitchen. Just like that, I had a job. But what Iris was really offering me was something I wouldn't understand until much later. Over the following week, she gave me a room above the bakery, her recipes. Her patience, her decades of knowledge passed down with flour-dusted hands and calm, steady instructions. She never raised her voice. She never made me feel small. When I made mistakes, and I made plenty, she would just nod and say that the dough teaches you if you let it. One evening after closing, she sat down at the little table by the window and told me something I carry with me to this day. She said that pastry is a language, a way of telling people they matter. She said that every time you hand someone something you made with your hands and your heart, you are saying, I see you, and you are worth this effort. I had to turn away because I didn't want her to see me cry. My mother had called it a waste. Iris called it a language. Same girl, same dream. Two completely different verdicts. But what neither of us knew yet was that this little bakery on a quiet street in Charleston was about to become the foundation of something we never could have predicted. Because a few months into my time there, Iris sat me down with 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face that told me something big was coming. She said she had an idea. Iris told me she was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that sits in your bones after decades of waking up before dawn, lifting flour bags, standing on your feet until your knees beg you to stop. She said her husband had been gone for years, and the bakery was the only thing she had left. But her hands weren't what they used to be. Her back wasn't what it used to be. And she had been watching me for months, watching how I moved through that kitchen like I had been born in it. She offered to sell me La Petite Maison for $1. $1. In return, she wanted 10% of whatever the bakery earned for the first few years. Not because she needed the money, because she wanted to know her life's work was still breathing. I asked her why me. She said she recognized something in me the first day I walked through that door. She said I looked at pastry the way she had looked at it when she was young, like it was the only thing in the world that made sense. I signed the papers. And just like that, at 19 years old, the girl with the garbage bag had her name on a deed. But owning it was one thing. Surviving it was something else entirely. That first year nearly broke me. The romance of owning your own place disappears fast when you are the one unclogging the drain at midnight, redoing the books at 2 in the morning, and waking up at 4 to start the ovens. There were weeks I barely slept, months I barely broke even. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, and gained anxiety I couldn't afford to keep. But I kept going. Every morning I opened that door, turned on the lights, and made something beautiful. Because that was the only thing I knew how to do. And somewhere deep down, I think I was trying to prove to a woman 2 states away that she had been wrong about me. And then something happened that I never saw coming. A customer filmed me one night. I didn't even know they were there. I had left the kitchen door open because it was hot, and someone passing by on the street held up their phone and recorded me at 4 in the morning, covered in caramel, talking to myself while I torched the top of a bourbon caramel cake. I was exhausted. My hair was a disaster. I was muttering instructions to myself like a lunatic. And apparently, that was exactly what the internet wanted to see. The video went everywhere, millions of views in days. And it wasn't just the cake people latched onto. It was the story. Someone dug up the details. The girl who got thrown out with a garbage bag and built a bakery from nothing in Charleston. It spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up. Food bloggers drove hours just to stand in line. The line outside La Petite Maison wrapped around the block, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't bake fast enough. I remember standing in the kitchen at 5 in the morning with dough on every surface, reading the comments on that video and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like the world was finally looking at me and not looking away. Iris came by during that stretch. She stood in the doorway watching the chaos, the crowd, the noise, and she just shook her head and laughed. She told me the bakery had never been that loud in 40 years. Then she looked at me, squeezed my hand, and said she always knew this kitchen was waiting for the right person. But here is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Within months, a woman named Madeline reached out. She was an investor who specialized in scaling small food brands, and she believed what I had could grow far beyond one little shop. She was right. Together, we opened a second location, then a third. Then the numbers started moving so fast I could barely keep up. I called Iris one evening after signing the deal for my 4th location. She was quiet for a long time on the other end. Then she laughed softly and told me she always knew the bakery was too small for me. I told her it was never too small. It was the biggest thing anyone had ever given me. She went quiet again after that. The good kind of quiet. Before long, I had 7 bakeries, a television show, a cookbook, and a name people recognized. On paper, I had everything. But even as the success piled up and the offers kept coming, there was a hollow place in my chest that none of it could fill. I thought about my family more than I wanted to admit. I thought about Whitney most of all, that closed door. That silence. It haunted me more than my mother's words ever did. What I am about to tell you is the part of this story that still makes my hands shake. When we started expanding, my accountant asked me to digitize all the old financial records from the early days. Back then, I didn't have software or a bookkeeper. I had a shoebox full of receipts and a checking account I barely kept track of. So for the first time, someone actually went through every line of the bakery's first year. And that is when I found something that stopped me cold. There were deposits, small, regular deposits into the bakery's account from the very first weeks. Couple hundred here, couple hundred there. Consistent, steady. Someone had been quietly feeding money into my business when I was too overwhelmed to notice. The transfers came from an account I didn't recognize, and they had stopped abruptly after a few months. I traced the account. It took some digging. And when I finally found the name attached to it, I had to sit down on the kitchen floor because my legs wouldn't hold me. Whitney. My sister. The one who never opened her door. The one I had spent years resenting for her silence that night. She had been sending me money. From the very beginning. She had found out where I was, found the bakery's account, and quietly kept me afloat during the months I was most vulnerable. And the reason the transfer stopped was not because she changed her mind, it was because my mother found out. Linda discovered what Whitney was doing and gave her the same ultimatum she had given me. Stop helping your sister, or you are out too. And Whitney kept sending the money anyway. So my mother cut her off. Her own golden child, the one she had built her entire identity around. Cast aside because she dared to love her little sister. I need you to sit with that for a second. The girl I thought abandoned me was the only one who fought for me. And she paid for it with everything she had. I found Whitney's number through an old college friend. When I called, there was silence on the line for so long I thought she had hung up. Then I heard her breathing. Then I heard her trying not to cry. And then she said my name, and something inside me that had been locked for 9 years broke wide open. We talked for hours. She told me everything. How she had been behind that door the night I knocked, crying into her pillow, terrified that if she opened it, our mother would hear and throw them both out before she could help me. How she made a plan. Let me leave, send money, then find a way to follow. How our mother caught her and made good on her threat. How Whitney spent years rebuilding alone, too ashamed to reach out because she thought I hated her. I told her I never hated her. I told her that closed door was the thing that hurt me most in the world. And she said it was the thing that hurt her most too. We cried together on the phone like two kids who had been lost in the woods and finally found each other. Whitney became my family again that day. Not because of blood, because of choice. She flew to Charleston the following week. When I saw her standing outside the bakery, looking at the sign, looking at what I had built, she covered her mouth with both hands and just stood there. I walked out and we held each other on that sidewalk for a long time. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. Just when I thought the hardest part of this story was behind me, life reminded me it wasn't done yet. A few weeks later, Whitney called with something heavier in her voice. Our mother was sick. Kidney failure, she needed a transplant, and without one, the doctors were not optimistic. Our father was not a match. Whitney was not a match. And our mother, the woman who packed my life into a garbage bag, was running out of options. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. The daughter she threw away was now the only person with the resources and the reach to help save her life. And she knew it. That is why they were at that ceremony. Whitney had convinced them to come. Not to beg, just to be seen. Just to remind me they existed. I stood backstage and looked at my mother through that curtain one more time. She looked small. Tired, like a woman trapped behind the walls she spent her whole life building. I walked out on that stage, I took the award, I gave my speech. And I did not look at my parents. Not once. After the ceremony, Whitney found me in the lobby. She was standing between our parents like a bridge holding two broken pieces together. My father couldn't look at me. My mother tried to and couldn't hold it. I told them I would help. But not for free. My condition was simple. The entire family would sit in a room together with a therapist. Not once. Not as a gesture. As a commitment. Every week, for as long as it took. I wanted the truth out of every single one of them. No more silence. No more pretending. If they wanted me in their lives again, they were going to have to earn it with honesty. I wasn't going to let my mother die while we figured things out. I started the donor search the same week. But the therapy was not negotiable. Those two things would run side by side. My father agreed immediately. Almost too fast. Like a man who had been waiting years for someone to force him into the chair, he was too afraid to sit in on his own. My mother resisted. Of course she did. Therapy meant admitting something was broken, and Linda had spent a lifetime making sure nothing ever looked broken from the outside. But Whitney talked to her. I don't know what she said. All I know is that the following Tuesday, all four of us were sitting in a room with a therapist named Dr. Reeves, and nobody was making eye contact. The first session was brutal. My father barely spoke. My mother sat with her arms crossed and her jaw tight, like she was enduring something medical. I said what I needed to say, that I built my life from a garbage bag and a bus ticket while they watched from a distance, and that I deserved to know why. Nobody had an answer that day. But that was fine. Because the truth was coming. And none of us were ready for it. The real earthquake came in the second session. And it started with the person I least expected. My father sat forward, put his hands on his knees, and the words came out of him like something that had been rotting inside for a decade. He said he was a coward. He said he watched his wife destroy his daughter and did nothing. He said he shook my hand at the door because he didn't trust himself to hug me. He knew if he held me, he wouldn't be able to let go, and he wasn't brave enough to fight my mother. So he let me walk away with $280 and a handshake, and he had been carrying that weight every single day since. The room went silent. My mother stared at the wall. Whitney stared at the floor. And I stared at my father and saw, for the first time in my life, a man who had been quietly drowning inside his own home for decades. But what happened next is what I could never have predicted. Over the following weeks, piece by piece, session by session, my mother started to crack. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Slowly. Like ice breaking up in early spring. She fought it every step of the way. She deflected. She blamed circumstances. She minimized what she had done. But Dr. Reeves was patient, and the truth has a way of finding daylight no matter how deep you bury it. It came out on a Thursday afternoon. My mother was mid-sentence, defending herself, explaining why she had pushed so hard for academic success, when something in her voice shifted. It got quieter. Thinner. And then she stopped talking entirely for what felt like a full minute. The room held its breath. When she spoke again, she wasn't talking about me anymore. She was talking about herself. About being a young woman who loved to paint, who spent every free hour with a canvas and a set of brushes her grandmother had given her, who dreamed of going to art school, of spending her life creating things that made people feel something. She talked about it in a way that made it clear she hadn't said any of this out loud in decades. Like the words had been locked in a room inside her and the door had finally given way. Her own parents shut that dream down before it had a chance to breathe. They told her art was not a career. They told her she was being foolish. They threw away her brushes. They enrolled her in a business program and told her to be grateful. And she never painted again. Not once. She buried that part of herself so deep she convinced herself it had never existed. And then, years later, her daughter walked into the kitchen and said she wanted to build her life around creating beautiful things. And instead of seeing a second chance, instead of seeing the dream she never got to live, my mother saw a mirror. And she couldn't stand what it reflected. So she did to me exactly what had been done to her. Not out of cruelty. Out of a wound so old she didn't even know it was still bleeding. She looked at me across that room and I saw something I had never seen on my mother's face. Not anger. Not control. Devastation. She said she did to me what was done to her. She said she didn't know how to be anything different. I sat there for a long time without saying anything. Because what do you say to that? The woman who destroyed your dream had her own dream destroyed first. The villain was also a victim. And no one had ever helped her heal. I am not going to lie and say I forgave her on the spot. I didn't. That kind of pain doesn't dissolve in a single afternoon. But something shifted in me that day. I realized my mother wasn't a monster. She was a casualty. Someone had broken her long before she broke me, and nobody ever helped her put the pieces back together. The cycle. That is what Dr. Reeves called it. And I was the first person in my family to break it. Meanwhile, the donor search I had started weeks earlier was in full swing. I wasn't a match myself, but I had something most people don't. A platform and a story people cared about. I organized a donor drive through my bakeries. I used my social media, my connections, my reach. Thousands responded. And after weeks of searching, a match was found. A stranger from Georgia who saw my story and walked into a clinic the next morning. The surgery was successful. My mother came through it. And when she opened her eyes in that hospital room, the first person she saw was Whitney on one side and me on the other. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. I didn't squeeze back. Not yet. But I let her hold it. A few weeks later, I hosted a live event at the flagship bakery in Charleston. A celebration for the community, for the team that helped me grow, for everyone who had been part of the journey. The place was packed. Cameras everywhere. People I loved filling every corner of that room. And then I saw her walk in. Iris. Silver hair pulled back, walking slowly but standing straight. She had come on her own. She found a seat near the back and sat there quietly, watching everything with those sharp eyes. When I spotted her from the stage, I stopped mid-sentence. The whole room went quiet. I stepped down, walked through the crowd, and knelt in front of the woman who changed my life with a $1 deal and an apron. She looked at me and told me she was proud of me. She said I took her small gift and built something beautiful with it. She said that was all she ever wanted to see. The whole room stood. Every single person. And Iris just sat there, shaking her head, pretending she wasn't crying. But she was, and so was I. And so was half the room. Whitney was there too, standing off to the side with tears running down her face. My sister. The one who fought for me in secret when nobody was watching. The one who paid for loving me with her own exile. We found each other after the event and walked along the waterfront until the sun went down. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about the future, about what we wanted to build together. about what family actually means when you strip away the obligation and the blood and just ask one simple question. Who showed up? She did. She always did, even when I couldn't see it. My mother is still in therapy, on her own now, working through decades of things she never dealt with. We talk sometimes, short calls, careful words. We are not okay yet, but we are trying. And that is more than I ever thought I would be able to say. My father writes me letters now, handwritten. He was never good with words out loud, but on paper, he is a different man. And at the end of every letter, he writes the same thing, that he is sorry, that he is proud, and that he should have said both a long time ago. People ask me all the time if I resent my mother, and the honest answer is complicated. She tried to throw me away. Instead, she set me free. Some people teach you who to become. Others teach you who not to be. My mother did both. And I think that is the most honest thing I can say about her. If you made it this far, I need to ask you something real. Who is your real family? Not the one you were assigned. The one who actually showed up when it mattered. The one who fought for you when it was inconvenient, when it cost them something, when nobody was watching. Drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be recognized. And one more thing. Has anyone ever told you that your dreams were a waste of time? That what you loved wasn't serious enough, wasn't worthy enough? Did you prove them wrong? Or are you still in the fight? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be the thing that keeps someone else going today. I will see you in the next one.